Autumn becomes winter, winter becomes spring, spring becomes summer, and summer becomes autumn. Seasons change and time passes. One thing becomes another, and another becomes what it once was. An infant grows into a boy, and a boy slowly into a man. 13 winters, 13 springs, 13 summers, and 13 autumns. Laughter and tears, joy and sorrow, happiness and pain. Love given and love lost, friendships forged and enemies born. Secrets are the doors behind which truth is hidden. The lies we tell are the locks that secure the door. Weary and burdened are those who hold the keys, for over time they become heavy in the hand. His journey in life has no map or directions, and the destination is unknown. However, all know where it comes to an end.
Chapter 1.
"I'm telling you, Thomas," Kasimir said as the wheels of the carriage moved over the cobblestone street, making a clicking sound that vibrated up through the wood framing. "That little whore really moaned when I planted my spear in her. Nice and tight. Her tits were a little small, but elven girls always make great sounds when you bend them over." Kasimir stood up from his seat, making obscene gestures while thrusting his hips back and forth. "I am sure you paid the price, Kasimir," Thomas mockingly said as he adjusted the strings on his lute, "and not a copper grain less." He carefully plucked a string and listened to the note. "Only 2 silver hounds," Kasimir said proudly. "The owner let me break her in for cheap. Something about her having— Oh, shit!" The carriage rocked and bucked as a wheel hit a hole, causing Kasimir to fall backward onto Leif. Leif let out a painful and surprised gasp as the weight of his cousin brought him out of his deep sleep. "Get off me, Kasimir, you're hurting me." "Oh, this is just fucking great!" Kasimir looked down angrily. The little darkling spawn is awake. He slapped the top of Leif's head hard and leaned back more, pushing his full weight down onto him. "Please, Kasimir, I can't breathe, cousin." Struggling to take in air, Leif gasped and tried to push Kasimir off him to no avail. "Come on, Kasimir, get off him, you can see he can't breathe." Thomas placed his lute to his side as the carriage came to a stop. "There is no need for all that. Just leave him alone, he is not bothering you." "Mind your words," Kasimir snapped as he stood back to his feet. "This little shit owes me his life after I saved him from those 2 orcs. He's lucky to be alive. I took them both down with 2 swings of my blade, while he sat there crying like a baby." With an open hand, he slapped the side of Leif's head as he tried to sit up. "Isn't that the truth, cousin?" Leif looked up, meeting the brassy-coloured eyes of Thomas. "It's true." His voice was a soft whisper, as he remembered back to that warm summer day. Kasimir smiled and laughed as he hacked at the orcish brother and sister, whose only crime was playing with Leif in the gardens of his father's estate. True, a crime punishable by death, for a darkling to engage with a lordling, especially with the only child of the Red Water's free lord. The only man to become a free lord in 60 autumns. Thomas, with a twinkle in his eye that Leif had become all too accustomed to over the last summer, gave him a sly wink. "I am sure your cousin was only crying because his grand cousin came to his rescue." Clearly he was amazed and overrun with joy. Kasimir smugly smiled and puffed up his chest. "Clearly you must be correct, good Thomas. You are wise beyond your years, my friend. If only others could see my greatness as you do." He looked down at Leif with a disgusted look. "Why in damnation have we stopped? We are going to be late for the opening of the pleasure house. All the good ones will be picked up before we get there. I am not going to take Boris's leftovers." "It will be fine." Thomas smirked and picked up his lute, playing a warm and calming tune. Each note was like a summer breeze on a hot day along the banks of the Red Water, among its willow trees and tall grasses. Leif gave Thomas a joyful smile as he listened to each note played by the boy's hand. "Boris can't go through that many elven girls before you get there." "You don't know Boris." Kasimir pulled back the silk curtain covering the window and stuck his head outside. "What is taking so long? I demand to know." "My apologies, Lord Lowind," the driver shouted, "but a carriage in front of us has a broken wheel. They are trying to move it but are having trouble. Shall we lend them aid?" "Lend them aid? Don't be so stupid, servant." Kasimir smashed his hand into the side panel, making a loud popping sound. Just go around them. I'm afraid I can't do that, my lord. The street is too narrow and I might get stuck against the buildings, the driver said, as Kasimir pulled his head back inside the wagon. Damn it, my uncle takes on the incompetent of servants. With a mixture of impatience and anger, Kasimir picked up his travel bag and opened the carriage door. Come on, Thomas, let's walk. I'm not going to wait around here all day. Kasimir, hold on, you can't be that impatient to dip your prick. Thomas abruptly ended his tune and reached for his own bag. That is a long walk to Lowtown, and without a guard, thugs will rob us blind. Worry about your own prick, Kasimir shouted while looking back into the carriage. Are you coming or not? I'm coming, just give me a damn moment. Leif watched as Thomas picked up his loot and exited the open door onto the street. Thomas! Leif jumped to his feet, worried that he might not see this wonderful person again, to hear his music and stories along the riverbanks and laugh at the jokes he made. He never had someone to call a friend until that fateful day when Kasimir brought Thomas home for the summer season. Will I see you at the academy? Thomas looked up with a smile, as he always did. Of course, he paused, then smugly said, My lord. Reaching his hand up, he ruffled Leif's light brown hair playfully, like a kind older brother. I'll be around, so be sure to keep an eye out for me, and I'll keep an eye out for you. I promise to keep an eye out for you. Leif paused, then in a tone just as smug as Thomas's own, said, Sir Bard, thank you for being my friend. Leif returned to his seat as he watched Thomas and Kasimir make their way down the street and turn at the corner, saddened by the departure of his whimsical friend, but ultimately relieved to be free of his insufferable cousin. Leif was truly not afraid of Kasimir. He could easily have placed his legs against the wall of the carriage and pushed him to the floor, then in the next instance, kicked him in the face. However, Leif feared what Kasimir would do to others if his pride was hurt by a boy 3 winters younger than himself. Leif smiled deeply as he thought back to the words of his father, Free Lord Lowind. Let those who you do not fear believe that you fear them, and those that you fear, you do not. Lord Lowind, the driver said from outside the carriage door. Yes, Henry? Leif pulled back the curtain, revealing the grandfatherly face of his father's best driver. Do you need something? No, my lord. Henry's warm smile and bright blue eyes had always been welcoming to Leif. Although Henry was only a dutiful servant to House Lowind, Leif's father had treated him kinder than the rest of the servants, opting to pay him more, and even taking care of the funeral arrangements out of his own pocket when Henry's wife passed away. I just wanted to inform you that it is going to be a little while longer before we get moving again, he added, his formal words slipping a bit as his common folk tongue came through. Thank you, Henry. Leif smiled and nodded his head. I don't mind. Is there anything else? Well, young lord, Henry said, giving his most mischievous smile, I would think my lord's legs must quite ache after 3 days of travel by carriage. I'm quite certain any longer and his legs will rot off. Might he like to take a walk outside and give his legs a stretch? Leif's mother, Lady Lowind, had given Henry and him explicit instructions that he was to remain inside the carriage while travelling through Potentia until they reached the gates of Montoth, unless remaining in the carriage would bring him great harm. Leif's eyes widened as his heart began to beat rhythmically in his chest. I think you might be right, Henry, he shouted, unable to contain his excitement as he jumped to his feet. He had never been to a large city, let alone the capital itself. Both his mother and father had kept him confined to the estate, never allowing him to venture outside its borders. Henry stepped back while holding open the door for Leif. Just stay close to the carriage so I can keep an eye on you. Potentia is a beautiful place, but it is full of spiders and snakes. Best not wander off, young lord. Leif hopped down from the carriage, his feet splashing into a small puddle of water from the light rain the night before. The air smelled of sweet bread and freshly cut flowers as he took in a deep breath of fresh air. The tall stone buildings, draped in decorative vines adorned with white and yellow flowers, made the street feel a bit confined. However, the confinement was not uncomfortable as one might think. It felt more like being wrapped in a warm blanket while lying in your bed. Wow, Leif gasped as he took in the beautiful scenery around him. This is amazing. Thank you, Henry. You're very welcome, lad. Henry closed the door of the carriage as Leif walked around, stretching the soreness out of his legs. Just stay close and get back inside if I tell you to. Own and help me if your mother found out I let you walk about. Your father would have to hide me in the pits of damnation to keep me safe from her. Leif nodded his head as two sentinels in their silver and golden armour approached the broken-down carriage in front of them. While his father was once a sentinel, he had never seen him in his armour. A static force rippled over his skin, indicating the sudden change of reality as one of the sentinels placed a single hand under the bottom rail of the wagon. The armoured man then easily lifted the back end of it from the ground with as much effort as picking up a discarded fabric from the ground. Oh, Onan! Leif's eyes widened, and his heart raced even faster as the sentinel moved the carriage from the street, giving space for others to pass by. Henry, did you see that? Oh, wow. Henry let out a warm laugh, seeing the excitement. Yeah, lad, I saw it. Do you think when I become a sentinel I'll be able to do that? Leif continued to watch as the sentinel placed the carriage back on the ground and then continued to walk down the street. Henry let out a sigh, then looked down at Leif and gave a forced smile. Oh, I am quite certain you will be able to do far more than that. He placed his hand onto Leif's back and carefully turned him back toward the door. Let's get you back inside and get moving. We have waited around here long enough. Pardon me, sir, a man wearing the well-cut uniform of a driver, in the colours of green and brown representing the house he served, said as he approached. The young lords, Bitor and Nomerous of House Crimson, would like to make a formal request of House Lowind for aid. Oh, House Crimson, you say? Henry said in a less than formal tone. And what might Lord Crimson's boys want to ask of young Lord Lowind? Well, kind sir, the man said, still holding to proper etiquette when addressing servants at the behest of another house. A formality and courtesy that Henry did not truly grasp. The alliance and support between each of the houses are well known throughout the Empire. Lord Crimson was one of House Lowind's staunchest supporters and sponsors when Lord Lowind was elevated to a free lord. The young lords hope that this past support carries favour for them in their current troubles. Henry looked down at Leif and made that same old mischievous face, causing Leif to smile. What do you think, lad? Should I tell him to kick rocks? No, Henry, Leif laughed warmly. House Crimson is a friend to House Lowind, and we should hear out the request. Suit yourself, Henry said, turning back to face the driver. Okay, out with it. What do you want? Well, good sir, the driver started to speak. Oh, enough with the flowery talk. By Onan, what do they want? Henry said impatiently. By the time we get through all your words, the lads will be grandfathers. Just tell me what they want. The driver let out a sigh. The lords would like to know if they and their two companions, Lord Hemlock from House Conium and Lady Mia from House Faewood, could perhaps ride with him to the academy, since their carriage has a broken wheel. What do you say, lad? Henry turned his attention back to Leif. Want to give them a hand? It would be mighty neighbourly of you to do so. Not to mention it's a chance for you to make friends with others close to your own age. Once again, Leif's eyes widened, and a joyful smile crossed his face. Would it really be all right? He looked up at Henry, then back at House Crimson's driver. Wouldn't Mother be upset? Not at all, Henry said. You are formally lending aid to an ally of House Lowind. It would be disrespectful to turn them away. Yes, they can ride with me. Leif's voice was a little louder than he intended. Henry looked down at him and gave Leif a slightly scolding look. Then, in a calmer tone, he said, Yes, House Lowind shall give its aid to House Crimson in their time of need. It would be an honour for House Crimson and their travel companions to accompany House Lowind to the gates of Montos. Well, you heard the young lord, Henry smiled as he looked back at the driver. We don't have all day. Go get them. What do I do, Henry? Leif said as a sick feeling began to settle in his stomach. What do I say to them? How do I act? He started to panic. Calm down, lad. Henry laughed as the driver opened the door of the broken-down carriage. Two brown-haired boys, wearing the brown and green colours of House Crimson, emerged from their carriage. Not only did they share the same attire, but they also had the same face. It's not like you were climbing into a cage with a beast or— Oh my! Henry's words stammered as a third boy stepped from the door. His long, dark braided hair draped down over his broad shoulders. His skin was dark ebony and he stood a full head over Leif. So that is why they broke a wheel. Finally, the driver reached his hand out towards the open carriage door, offering it to the final occupant. Leif's racing heart nearly came to a sudden stop in his chest as a soft, pale-skinned hand reached out and took the offered hand. Her hair was like black silk, and her face was like a misty morning in a secret forest, with pale green eyes. The fear he felt about meeting others was now replaced with a new fear. A girl. "Wow, she's beautiful, Henry," Leif exclaimed as the beautiful young girl looked to him and smiled shyly, then quickly looked away. She tucked her hair up and over her right ear, revealing the golden ear cap adorning the top of her ear. It was an old-fashioned statement and tradition among noble houses, signalling that she was free to court. The revealing of the ear cap also signalled to Leif that he specifically was free to court her. "That she is, lad, but you had better keep your guard up," Henry began to chuckle. "I was first worried about that conium beast of a boy, but I see now it's the tiger you should worry about." "Greetings, House Crimson. I am Lord Leif of House Lowind." Leif addressed the twin brothers first as the group approached. "Greetings, Lord Leif of House Lowind. I am Lord Bitor," the first brother said with a mischievous smile. "And I am Lord Nomerous," the second brother said with the same mischievous smile. "On behalf of House Crimson, we thank you for your aid." Both brothers simultaneously looked at one another, and then back to Leif. "Greetings, Lord Leif of House Lowind," the hulking boy said in an energetic tone, with an accent hinting at his Southern Isles heritage, as he offered his hand. "I am Lord Hemlock Conium of House Conium. It is a pleasure to meet you, my friend." Leif smiled widely as he took hold of Hemlock's offered hand. "It is a pleasure to meet you as well, Lord Hemlock," he said, watching with amazement as Hemlock's hand practically swallowed his own. "Good. I think you and I are going to be great friends, no, Lord Leif?" Hemlock shook Leif's hand as if he were holding a small baby chick, worried that he might crush it, then released Leif just as carefully. Still smiling up at Hemlock, Leif answered, "I think you were quite right, Lord Hemlock." Nervously, Leif turned to face the beautiful daughter of House Faewood. "Greetings, Lady Faewood. It is a pleasure to meet you," he said, his words a bit shaky as he got lost in her lovely pale green eyes. "Greetings, Lord Leif." She giggled slightly and blushed, her own words a bit nervous as she brushed her hair once again over her right ear. "I am Lady Mia Faewood of House Faewood, and it is a pleasure to meet you as well." "Okay, enough hoot talk, you'll get on in the carriage," Henry said as he opened the door for the children. "Me and the other driver have work to do loading up your belongings, and it's not going to get done by itself. So, get a move on." Leif, along with his new companions, each smiled and nodded their heads to Henry. Taking Mia by the hand, Leif helped her up into the carriage first, followed by the twin brothers. He then watched as Hemlock turned back towards the broken-down House Crimson carriage. "Lord Hemlock, are you not going to join us?" Hemlock looked back at Leif and gave him a big toothy smile. "I will soon, my new friend, but I must gather my belongings. It is not right for a member of House Conium to put tasks off onto others that they can do themselves." Leif smiled and stepped down from the carriage. "Well, let me aid you in your tasks, my new friend," he said, as he began helping Hemlock, Henry and Crimson's driver in moving the others' belongings. Hemlock patted Leif on the shoulder as the two boys worked. "Ah, yes, good friends indeed."
Thomas followed along with Kasimir as the two boys made their way down the streets of Lowtown. The air in this part of Potentia had a much different smell than other parts of the city. It no longer smelled of flowers and bread, but was wet, musky, and a bit dirty, despite the streets being clean of any refuse. Thomas took in a deep breath and smiled deeply as he thought back to his past life on the streets of Hookraven, the home he had lost at the hands of his own hated foe. The life that was has now become the life that is. "What's that, Thomas?" Kasimir asked as the two of them stopped just outside the Moonlight Walk, a pleasure house. "Nothing, Kasimir. Just glad the two of us didn't get stabbed in the back and left for dead in an alleyway," Thomas jokingly said, as he left his reverence for home deep back in his mind as they walked inside the establishment. "The only stabbing I am planning for involves my prick." Kasimir grabbed at his trousers and began to rub himself rudely as a lovely elven girl with her small bare chest exposed walked in front of them. Licking his lips, Kasimir reached out and grabbed the elf by her arm, yanking her close to him. "Oh, I have so missed this place." Thomas bowed his head slightly as the pity he felt for her hung on his face like a weight pulling his head down. Her eyes began to fill with tears as Kasimir's hand moved up and over her breast. "Kasimir, Is that Boris over there, sitting at the bar? Oh, shit! Kasimir quickly pulled away from the poor girl and looked in the direction of the bar. I think you're right. Damn it to the pits of damnation. I knew he would be here before us. We could always go across the street to one of the other pleasure houses, like Maple Tap, Thomas suggested, seeing the irritated look on Kasimir's face. Gnomes, Thomas, Kasimir said, as a nervous sweat broke out over his face. You're sick in the head. Thomas smiled at Kasimir as the two of them both started to laugh. Me? Mother said I was a bit touched, Kasimir, he said with a lisp, while crossing his eyes and pushing up the tip of his nose with his finger. Thomas had watched Kasimir closely over the summer and learned much about the young lord, particularly Lord Kasimir Lowind's deep-seated fear of gnomes. Kasimir placed his hand on Thomas's shoulder and breathed in and out heavily while continuing to laugh. Oh, you had me going there for a moment, Thomas. For a moment I thought you were being serious. Thomas made a face of disgust and stuck out his tongue as if he had tasted something vile. Oh, that's gross thinking about it. Great. Now I have a bad taste in my mouth. Mind getting me a pint to wash it out? Still laughing, Kasimir wiped a tear from his eye. Sure, my friend, and if you like, I'll pick out a knife ear or two for you. No, the pint will be fine, Thomas said. I am going to set myself up over in the corner and see if I can make a little bit of coin. I shouldn't wear myself out before making the coin to do so. A pint it is then. Kasimir headed off into the sparsely crowded room towards the bar, away from Thomas and the elven girl. Letting out a sigh, Thomas let his laughter as a facade drop, then turned and began to walk towards an empty corner in the room. He had begun to grow very weary of Kasimir Lowind, and just wanted a moment away from him. A soft, warm hand then rested against his chest. Thank you, Sir Bard. I have heard tales of Lord Lowind from my sisters, how he hurts them. I feared that I would be the one he chose. Her lovely eyes looked passionately into Thomas's own as she started to breathe heavily. Think nothing of it, my lady. Thomas gave her a warm smile and started to walk away. She leaned into Thomas and placed both her hands on his chest. She softly licked her lips and lightly bit her bottom one as she looked up at him. Please let me repay you. Her breathing grew heavier as her soft pink nipples became erect, pushing into the fabric of his tunic. Thomas looked down at her and placed his finger and thumb just below her soft lips. With his other hand, he brushed her golden hair back over her delicate ear. His touch sent a shiver through her. Leaning in, he whispered to her, Sal will call be part ath yours viaren peoples avem hao, ent salen arael belonglor fe longlor, child of Oberon. Pulling back from Thomas quickly, a tear ran down her cheek as she gasped, then placed both hands over her mouth. Thank you, she whispered softly to him as he continued his way to the empty chair and table in the corner. Thomas placed his bag against the wall and took his lute, which was strapped to his back, and held it like a newborn child. Okay, Emma, let's earn our keep, he whispered to the lute. Thomas's fingers softly plucked at his instrument's delicate strings, coaxing out the tender notes that filled the room. Oh, my sweet moonlight lady, I am lost in your eyes. I can't see where you have gone. Please don't say you have died. Your kiss stole my heart, and without it, I will die. The room fell quiet as humans and elves alike all turned and watched Thomas as his fingers pulled slow, warm notes with each touch. Oh, my sweet moonlight lady, I am sorry that I lied. Please don't leave me. What a fool am I. I have looked for you by sea and in the deep blue sky. Oh, my sweet moonlight lady, please don't cry. Oh, my sweet moonlight lady, what a fool am I. Now you're gone. Now you're gone. Oh, my sweet moonlight lady, Please forgive. Please forgive me." As his song slowly came to an end and the room fell quiet, each of the patrons raised their glasses to him. Even Kasimir, while holding a pint, raised it high into the air. An older man took off his brown, wide-brimmed hat and passed it around the room. The sound of coins clicking against one another as they fell into it echoed until the hat made its way to Thomas. Smiling, Thomas dumped the coins into his bag and held up the hat, offering it back to the old man. The man just smiled and gestured for him to put it on his head. Doing so, Thomas then tipped his new hat to the crowd and returned to playing his lute. "Hey, you!" A man reeking of drink and sweat stumbled his way over to Thomas's table. "Hey, Bard, you play wonder—" The man swayed back and forth, almost falling over onto him, but steadied himself by placing both hands on the table. "I wanted to ask you." He paused and looked down at the empty chair. "Do you mind?" The man pointed to the empty chair. "Not at all, kind sir." Thomas smiled warmly at the drunken man, while playing much livelier notes than before. "Please, be my guest." The man continued to sway back and forth as he took the seat. "Thank you very much," he said as his face turned green and his cheeks began to bulge like that of a chipmunk. Seeing this, Thomas kicked a conveniently placed mop bucket, causing it to slide and stop next to the man's chair. Patrons and slaves all averted their eyes from Thomas and the man as he spewed his afternoon lunch and drink into the bucket. He then pulled his head up and asked, "Do you know the song, Summer's News?" His eyes rolled back as his head came crashing down onto the table with a loud bang. Two large men, pleasure house guards, approached the table, placed their arms under the now passed-out man, and began to lift him up. "Apologies, Sir Bard. Let us remove him and let you get back to your craft." Thomas placed his hand on the man's back and looked up at the two men. "Ah, there is no need for that. He is truly not bothering my craft. Let him sleep." Reaching down into his bag, Thomas removed 2 gold coins and handed one to each of the men. "Here, for your trouble." "Thank you, Sir Bard. But are you sure he is no trouble to you?" They both eased the man back into his seat. "Quite sure, and if he does become a problem, I'll help you drop him into the horse trough outside." Thomas returned his hand to the strings of his lute. The two men nodded and left Thomas's table richer than when they had approached. "You owe me 2 coins for that." "Sorry about that, Thomas. I did not mean to hit my head on the table that hard," the man said, as he let drool leak from his mouth onto the table. "So, do you have any news about the Red Water and House Lowind?" "Nothing new that we don't already know." Thomas smiled and nodded his head as Kasimir looked towards him. "I followed that insufferable vulgar twat around all summer. If anyone places a mark out for him, let them know I will do it free of charge. Other than that, House Lowind is truly a house of respect and honor. They don't even hide the actions of that cunt." "At least you got to relax in the countryside." The man reached up, wiped away the snot from his nose and eyes and closed them. "I had to wander around Lowtown as a vagrant, begging for food and drink. What about Lord Lowind's son, Leif?" Thomas smiled as he thought of his young friend. "I like that kid. Kasimir has no clue that Leif has been holding himself back from hurting him. Might want to talk to the others about inviting him to our studies at the academy. He would make a good whisper. Any news that I should know about?" They found the body of another lordling, this time a girl. She was floating along the banks of a creek just outside the city. They haven't been able to tell who she is or what house she is from. The man moved his head back and forth on the table, rubbing his face into the drool. "That is the 3rd one this season, Best keep your eyes open. There is a killer out there. There are 2 killers sitting at this table, Rod. Thomas's eyes narrowed. That is true, Thomas. I'll talk to the others about Leif when we meet at the room. But Thomas... Rod let out a long sigh. You got a letter and a possible mark. I don't think you should get too friendly with the boy. Both are in your bag. You're not going to like it. Who's the mark from? Thomas asked as he continued to play his lute. Rod swallowed deeply while his face turned a pale white, nearly breaking him out of character. It's from the eye. His voice and tone a warning. Thomas's fingers fumbled, causing him to hit 3 wrong notes in a row. The Order of the Eye. Why are they asking for the services of a prefect? Why not just go to the Order of the Finger? Thomas smiled to the crowd and held up his side flask, then shook it a bit. The patrons laughed and shook their own drinks as they returned to their own conversations. Don't know. Rod relaxed and fell back into his character. Just be careful, my friend. The professor said that you would be graded on this task, and you are not allowed to have outside assistance. You cannot discuss it with the other classmates either. Great. Classes have not even started, and I have been assigned my finals. Thomas huffed out annoyed. Who's the letter from? Don't know. I found it on your bed. Rod let out a yawn and stretched his arms out, then rested them on the table around his head. Well, it's great to have you back, but I need to finish up my assignment and check in with the others. Do you mind helping me out? Sure. Thomas deliberately pulled his hand down, causing his melody to end with a horrible ear-piercing shriek. Damn it, guards! He shouted and kicked Rod's seat, sending him crashing to the floor. I tried to be friendly to you and give you a place to rest your head, but no one touches Emma. The same 2 men rushed over and lifted Rod from the floor. Come on, you're out of here. Thomas started to rise from his seat. Here, let me help you with him, he said, as all the eyes in the room fell on the spectacle. Thank you for your help, Sir Bard, the smaller man said with a smile, as the bigger of the 2 roughly threw Rod over his shoulder. But I think we can handle this. Thank you, gentlemen. Thomas gave a sly smile. Be sure to give him a good dunking. His smell has ruined my will to perform. Rod let out a long, perturbed sigh as he was carried out the front door and onto the street. Thomas rested his lute on the table and took up a more relaxed position. Reaching down into his bag, he found the letter Rod had carefully placed inside. A memory from his past flashed before his eyes as his fingertips dragged against the sealed parchment. Fire, blood, ash, and death surrounded him as each of them made the only choice they had, friend and foe alike fighting side by side to survive. The life that was has now become the life that is, he whispered to himself as he broke the seal and began to read. To whom it may concern, it has been a long time, my friend. I still hold the name Amanda. I am 96 winters old, the mother of 4, and grandmother of 16, and great-grandmother of another 16. I hope this letter finds you well. Might I ask you your name? Thomas smiled deeply as he read the words, his heart filling with warmth and peace. And the life that is becomes the life that was.